and I just gotten word that the defense attorney is going to be speaking. Michael Brown, is he
Really
at
did
the
a great
podium?
job of
And we're ready.
gathering
He's
the
at the
evidence.
podium now. We're going to listen in.
Going down, they went down hundreds of rabbit holes, and when you look at the amount of evidence and you connect the dots, they really did a great job. And I'm talking about the investigators, the detectives, the experts, the assistant district attorneys. So I know, I'm sure that the families of the victims are very grateful to the district attorney, and the people of this county should be as well. This was an unprecedented case, and I can tell you that I am very fortunate to have had a legal team that helped me on this over the course of the last 2.5 years. I don't know where Mr. Capone is, and Mr. Fuchs. They are excellent writers, and we battled this from day one, and we were prepared from day one to try this case. Chase Brown has been an excellent help in terms of everything we've been doing. He is a rising star in this county. My co-pilot, Danielle Koish, she really, really put together that Fry hearing. That was such a monumental hearing here in New York State. And she's organized and came up with such crafty arguments during the course of this case. So I'm really grateful for their help. We really were, in my opinion, zealous. We did our best to be competent and effective during the course of this prosecution and the defense. One of the things that I was very mindful of and made a deliberate point is we attacked the evidence. We never attacked these young ladies, these victims. That was never our objective. We never said a bad word about them, and they ran into some tough times. They were all beautiful young ladies. Their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, I can go on and on. But it was never about attacking them. It was always about attacking the evidence. So I think that this today gave hopefully some peace and some closure to the family members. This case is over from our standpoint. We heard the prosecutor indicate there will be no further prosecutions in exchange for his plea of guilty, as well as his cooperation with the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Behavioral Analysis Unit. I respect the press and their role in the criminal justice system, so I'm happy to take some questions to the best that I can.
Was there specific...
What changed and when? That's what we're trying to figure out.
Well,
I mean, he had insisted on innocence.
I can't give you our conversations that are confidential, but I will say to you that there came a point in this defense where Rex said, I want to plead guilty.
When?
And it was at that point when we really had an objective of protecting his interests.
Sure, but can you give us some sense of timeline of when that was?
No, because that's all confidential. I'm not going to get into the time frame.
Is he cooperating with the FBI?
Sorry?
Has he spoken to ASA?
Has he spoken to ASA? You'd have to ask ASA.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the parameters of the FBI cooperation? Because we couldn't really hear you on the mic well when you mentioned that in court. And what does that mean for a potential federal prosecution of Rex, if at all?
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to discuss any of that. All I can say is he has an obligation to cooperate fully and completely with the Federal Bureau of Investigations Behavioral Analysis Unit. Can't get anything different.
Has that already begun?
Yes, sir.
This plea comes sometime after the judge ruled on DNA. Was that part of the calculation that there was just another obstacle in the way to try to prove his innocence versus pleading guilty?
Well, we don't have to prove innocence, obviously.
Well, not prove innocence,
but I understand your question. Yeah, I mean,
Another
listen,
better.
there are a couple of things that were major decisions in this case from a strategic point, from a strategic standpoint for the defense. In terms of likelihood of success at trial, so to speak, the judge's ruling on the Fry hearing was monumental. Yes, that's a big deal, because if you remember, you have mitochondrial DNA, and the statistical likelihood is not that great. I feel like I'm a broken record, but that was 2.5 years ago. We talked about that. But once that nuclear DNA comes into play, those statistics, as portrayed by this expert, the Street Lab, they're off the charts. So that's a major part of how successful you're going to be at trial. Another major part is our motion to sever, which Ms. Koish wrote a great motion on that, because we didn't think, we suggested that the cumulative effect would have been so overwhelming agreed with us, and the court permitted all of the counts in the indictment to remain together. That's a big, big win for the prosecution.
Mr. Brown, you
Yes.
yourself told us many times that you believed he was not the guy. When did your thoughts on that change?
Well, my thoughts aren't important. At some point, he admitted responsibility to us and indicated that he wanted to pursue the trial. So I don't sit there and judge a case. Our objective and our job is to be zealous advocates for the client. Right? That's what we do. We do it on every single case. A good lawyer is going to advocate for their client. That's what we've been doing from day one. My beliefs, and it's insignificant.
Mr.
Mike,
Brown,
yes, sir.
the hearing is often, these kinds of hearings are so clinical. Can you give us an understanding of his mindset coming in, and whether he, without betraying confidences, may have said something that indicated a particular way he was thinking or feeling about this?
Talking about this morning?
Yeah.
Well, this is not something that nothing has been done from the hip. We don't shoot from the hip on this case. This case, every single decision we've made has been calculated and thought out, and we've thrown it around hundreds of times. And the reason I say that is, we've been speaking to him and preparing him for today, and that's been ongoing for weeks.
Is he sorry?
I would hope so.
Has he expressed remorse?
I expect at sentencing he'll have something to say. I'll leave it at that.
Was it a sense of relief, you think, for him to
I do.
admit this tonight?
I did. I think that was a huge sense of relief for him. I can't, I'm not in a position, obviously, and I never will be, but when you have that type of in your head and on your body, I think by admitting it, I think it's cathartic to some extent, sure.
Mike, can we expect
family
him to get into more detail about how he did all of this at sentencing?
Yeah.
What does the fact of the DNA evidence not being appealable do for other cases in this state?
I'm going to let Ms. Corso answer that, because she really is now an expert on this area.
Yeah, so what we have in this Friday decision is a Supreme Court decision.
Can she just talk?
Okay, it's a Supreme Court decision. Another Supreme Court justice could hear the same issues and either agree with Judge Mazie or disagree with Judge Mazie. It's not a controlling decision yet, okay? So I assume we're going to hear more. I think that this type of technology, now that the door was open, is going to be used more, and similar legal challenges are going to be raised. And it's up and until we get to the higher courts, what we call the appellate division over in Brooklyn or even our Court of Appeals, does that decision become binding. So Judge Mazie's decision certainly opened the door. We're going to see it, and I'm sure we're going to hear what other Supreme Court justices and other judges in New York think about the case. But as of right now, it's just a door opening decision.
Mr. Brown, can you just clarify if there was an agreement? He's pleaded guilty to 7 counts. He also acknowledged an 8th murder. But then there's something about no future prosecutions. Does that mean if there were other victims found in Suffolk that there would not be prosecutions?
No, there will be no further prosecutions.
Meaning no other person could be prosecuted.
How did that end up argued?
When he decided he wanted to plead guilty, we had that covered as part of his plea, and there'll be no further prosecution as long as he cooperates with the Federal Bureau of Investigation of Behavioral Health.
So is
Did
he
his family play-
that he has no other victims out there?
But he's maintained there's no other victims other than me.
When did Karen Bravada enter a negotiation with you?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I don't have the timeline. I can't tell. Obviously, she came into play. Her as a victim came into play at some point. I can't tell you exactly.
8 months?
Krista?
I don't know.
How much was the...
Mr. Brown, could you tell us if his family might have helped him make this decision?
I think that they speak, and I think that there was, I can tell you that, I'll say this, certainly several of his concerns, he had many about why he didn't want to go to trial and plead guilty. He certainly wanted to save the families of the victims of the ordeal of going to trial, and coupled with saving his family that ordeal. So I know that there was conversations during the course of this defense between his family members and himself in regards to that.
Did he not want his family members, his wife and his daughter, to know the details of the murders that he committed?
I would assume that. I'm sure, again, there was conversations about having them avoid the ordeal of the trial. It was definitely a factor.
How much of a factor was the federal charges, and would that death penalty a factor in the decision?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm not at liberty to discuss that. The record speaks for itself.
What were the total
The legal fees?
that he had spent?
So this is an assigned case. The county, most murders in Suffolk County, there's a organization called WPIX-TV. It's an assigned counsel under the UPIX. And they're the ones who.
Mr. Brown, what is Mr. Heuermann's outlook now that he is no longer in the fighting phase? He's now facing the rest of his life behind bars.
I don't know. I just got the plea this morning.
Do you have any concerns about him in terms of being confined for so long and how he might react to that?
We didn't cross that bridge.
You know, this man, he was an architect, a father, married. Did he ever talk once he decided he was going to plead guilty about what motivated him to pull these women?
Those conversations, if we did have them, obviously going to be confidential. I would expect that when he talks to the behavioral science unit, they'll have those very questions to ask him, but I can't disclose them.
Mr. Brown, the last time we were here, you said the person who killed the victim also killed Shannon Gilbert. And you said that with some modicum of certainty.
I think what we talked about is it could be very likely that the one who is responsible for this is also responsible for Shannon Gilbert. He had nothing to do with Shannon Gilbert, and my understanding is, and I'm not going to advocate one way or another.
And you've been listening in there as Michael Brown, who's the attorney for Rex Heuermann, has been talking about what happened in the courtroom today, answering a lot of questions from reporters, and also in a very odd moment, Dante Mills, as a criminal defense attorney, kind of apologizing for representing Rex Heuermann.
I got that sense. The first couple of sentences out of his mouth was him kind of acknowledging and apologizing somehow for taking the stance or his stance in representing this person. I know that he came out and spoke and made it adamant throughout the representation that he didn't believe he committed these crimes.
I mean, isn't that like rule number 1 in the criminal defense attorney handbook? You always say your client is innocent. You proclaim their innocence.
Kind of. Sometimes you don't if there's evidence against them. But I can tell you how you approach this as a criminal defense attorney, or at least how I approach it. And I know Michael Brown. He's a good attorney. He has good legal acumen. I know that he takes the proper approach, which should be you're not representing an individual. And there's a lot of clients that I have that I never even ask them if they're guilty or innocent. What I'm doing is
because you don't want to hear the answer.
Well, because it almost doesn't, not that it doesn't matter, but my job is to make sure that the prosecution proves their case.
Right.
They have a responsibility. You're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
My job is to make sure that they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's and meeting the legal standard. If there's an argument that I can make that they dropped the ball somewhere or can't prove this, I'm going to make that argument because my job is to protect the system. We want the system to be available for innocent people to prove they're not guilty, right? And to get a not guilty verdict by saying you didn't meet your burden.
Right.
That's my job.
Get
not
a fair trial.
My job is not to meet an individual client and attach myself to the guilt or innocence of that client and have that determine how I'm approaching the legal system.
Because
my
every
job
person
is to protect the
is
system.
entitled to a defense.
Absolutely.
Right.
And a prosecution should appreciate what I do. I'm making them do their job, right? I'm not going above or beyond that. Now I'm finding crafty ways to do it, right? My job is to be an advocate, and I'm going to make sure that I attempt to control the narrative to make it clear if they can't prove something. If there is something missing, it's my job to bring that out.
And
but that's what I'm doing.
And you and I were talking about DNA evidence because Michael Brown was bringing it up there at the podium and talking about the nuclear DNA evidence and how things shifted. And he said, you know, it was off the charts statistically. And you were saying that, you know, you've had to defend against DNA evidence many times in your career, and it is not an exact science.
It's not, because there's different avenues to it for DNA. You're talking about direct DNA. If you touch something, that could be transfer DNA, which is what, you know, they're going to allege happened with the family members, where some DNA,
Assa's hair,
hair
ended
got
up
on
the
Rex
body.
and then transferred, even though they didn't have direct contact.
Right.
They're going to use that, you know, the family's going to use that to say we weren't directly involved. That's transfer DNA.
Right.
So if you can make that argument there, then a defendant can make that argument and say, I was never on that scene. Somebody may have been close to me and then went to that scene and my DNA was transferred there. We have to remember, they're talking about this initial case was broken open because of pizza crust. DNA on a pizza crust. And we're talking about murders that happened decades ago. I'm certain that when this murder occurred, no one would have believed that pizza crust could have broke a case open based on DNA. Right. But now we're looking at modern technology solving older crimes. That's happening more and more often when you hear about these cold cases and some things that they're finding that were found on the victims that they're now tying to people that they believe committed these crimes.
Well, and I also want to give props for the incredible detective work that was brought to bear once there was a new chief in town. Rodney Harrison, who was an NYPD detective. He was a boots-on-the-ground guy who rose through the ranks of leadership, retired from the NYPD, took on the job as a Suffolk County police commissioner, and he asserted, we are going to solve this case. And I think he was really confident in the fact that he knew there was evidence that he could follow. And indeed, it ended up being cell phone technology and identification of a vehicle, narrowing that down, working on geography. I mean, they used good old-fashioned detective work, and the DNA sealed it.
They caught a serial killer. Who could potentially still be out there killing victims as we speak. And now we'll no longer have the ability to do that. So I'm glad they put the time in because that's what it took. Attention, time, detail. I'm sure money went into this.
Sure.
And when those bodies started to pile up, that's what got their attention. And I'm very glad that they took the time to get to the bottom of this.
This is what the victims deserved.
No question about it.
This is what the families deserved. And to speak to that more, we have Mary Murphy with us. She's at the courthouse this morning. Mary Murphy is a longtime reporter here at WPIX-TV, a very storied career in journalism. And even though she is retired, she had followed this case for 30 years. And she wanted to be here for this closing chapter. She got up early this morning. She got online at the courthouse, and she made sure that she was in the courtroom when she could see this. Mary, there is nobody better to talk about what you saw and heard and felt in that courtroom than you. So let's hear from you.
Well, I have to tell you, Kirsten, I'm grateful that I got in because when I arrived here at 6:45 this morning, there was already a line, but I did get it into the main courtroom. We sat there for about an hour and a half before the proceedings started. There were about 32 seats for family members of the victims. And Rex Heuermann came in. He's, a lumbering guy. He was once described by a witness in this case as looking like an ogre. He's a very big man. He had a charcoal gray suit on. And basically, though, in some ways, the elocution was anticlimactic. One thing I did learn, though, he said for each victim, he admitted to 7 in the indictment and an 8th murder that we had heard about, but now he admitted to it. All of them, he said, were strangled. What's interesting about that is that in some cases, the victims were dismembered. Now, Valerie Mack, you're showing her on the screen. Her torso was found in Manorville, Long Island. There's Jessica Taylor. There's Melissa Barthelemy. They're all coming up now. Some of the victims were intact. The Gilgo 4, the first women that were discovered on Gilgo Beach in 2010, they were all intact. But then as the search continued along Ocean Parkway on Long Island, more victims were found that were believed to be tied to this serial killer who was so elusive for so long. The 8th person that he pleaded guilty to today was a woman named Karen Vergata. She was originally from the Glen Cove area of Long Island. And she unfortunately fell into street work because she had some problems in her life. Her legs were found near Fire Island in 1996. And I was anchoring the weekend news and reported on this find on Fire Island, not knowing that it was the work of a serial killer. We didn't know till 14, 15 years later that Karen Vergata was believed to be a victim.
Right. And I know that they found the balance of her remains some 13 or 15 years later when it washed ashore on the South Shore of Long Island. And it was interesting how he changed his disposal methods, and it was those 4 bodies that he disposed of along Ocean Parkway that were found by just pure happenstance. It was a police officer who decided to take his canine out for just a little training walk. And this dog along, and Mary, you know how many, like dozens and dozens of miles are along the South Shore there. It stretches forever. And
Well,
that
Ocean
this,
Parkway goes about 15 miles at least.
yeah,
You know.
and that this dog just happened to be on that spot and find the first of the bodies. It was just an incredible set of circumstances.
Well, the dog was actually looking for the woman whose disappearance actually launched this entire investigation. He was looking for a woman named Shannon Gilbert, who had disappeared in May of 2010, and her family had gone out to Ocean Parkway, to that area of Oak Beach where she was last seen.
Right.
And so the dog was periodically looking for her along the north side of Ocean Parkway, and that's when he discovered Melissa Barthelemy in December of 2010. Initially, everyone thought it was Shannon Gilbert, but then DNA showed it was another victim. Shannon Gilbert's body was found a year later in Oak Beach in the marsh.
Which was just incredible that after all of that police work and the number of cadets that they had all going through that scrub that is that part of Long Island, that it took so long to finally discover her. And it has been such, bitterness for her own family, because they believe that Shannon had been murdered as well, but the medical examiner and the case has not led to that conclusion, that she became disoriented as she ran off into the night and unfortunately died of exposure.
Well, her cause of death was considered undetermined, and her family never believed that it was an accident, but a different bunch of administrations in the police department and the DA's office all seem to think it was an accident. But there are a lot of people that follow this case, especially on the web sleuths. They're not convinced. But today was quite a remarkable day. You just heard Rex Heuermann say guilty, 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 guilty 7 times. He didn't say guilty the 8th time because he wasn't formally charged with Karen Brugada's murder.
Right, and now he cannot be charged with that at this point in time.
Yeah, apparently the agreement was there will not be any further prosecutions for these 8 murders, because I just asked Michael Brown about that. Can you please clarify? What if there are other victims that are found in Suffolk County? Could there be future prosecutions on other victims? And Michael Brown would only say, well, no future prosecutions on these 8 victims. So really he didn't answer the question, but it seems, if other victims are found, say in Nassau County, it's my understanding that there is a woman that was found in Nassau County in 1989 her case is being very closely looked at by the state police.
Oh, that would be very interesting, because that would be before he was married for the first time. He was married in 1990, and then he and Asa married again in 96. So that would be before that first initial marriage. Also interesting is that Heuermann has agreed to work with the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit.
Yes, well, my ears perked up when I heard that.
Right.
There was that show that was on Netflix, Mindhunter, I believe it was called, and there was a book by John Douglas, the FBI profiler. Well, when I heard that he was working with the Behavioral Analysis Unit, I thought that was a real note, because what they do, they want to know what makes a serial killer tick, what motivates them.
Yes.
So I thought that was really interesting when I heard that.
It's real, like data mining almost in real time from a human subject, because they, serial killers are such anomalies, and it is such a horrifying set of circumstances that kind of come together in the formation of a human that turns them into this killing machine.
Yeah, I mean, and in some of the cases, he dismembered his victims. He was a hunter, so he had knowledge of animal anatomy, human anatomy, and it's, some of the women that were found, they were found in really horrifying conditions, especially the 2 that were found in Manorville, Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack. They were tied up in really a horrific way.
And I know that part of the reason that Rex has chosen to take this plea is that he can, in some way, control the narrative. So now all the details don't come out. He still gets to hold that as his secret, what he was able to do, how he was able to carry out these atrocities, and it doesn't get brought out in public for the families and for his own family.
Yeah, and another case that is still a mystery to us, but the victim was found right in the middle of Ocean Parkway, the north side, right next to the Gilgo 4. The victim known as Asian Doe.
Right.
He was born a biological male, dressed in women's clothing, and one of the searches that Rex Heuermann did on his computer, of the many hundreds of really kind of sick searches, one of them used a slang term. And I'm going to, emphasize this is slang, called Asian twink. And that is a slang word used for an effeminate male. So we are curious to know, if he had anything to do with that victim. He didn't plead guilty to that, but that's one of the only cases that's unresolved now. I think it is the only case unresolved on Ocean Parkway. There were remains of 10 victims found. The one known as Peaches was found in Jones Beach. Her extremities were found there during the Gilgo Beach search. But what happened was, recently, in the last couple of months, a former U.S. Army sergeant from the South, he was charged with killing Peaches, whose real name is Tanya Jackson. Her daughter was found on the opposite end of Ocean Parkway, about more than a dozen miles from her mother. The girl was only 2 years old. Her name was Tatiana Dykes. She was intact, wrapped in a blanket, very closely found to Valerie Mack, who was a Gilgo victim that Rex Heuermann pleaded guilty to today. But there may never be justice for the baby, because Suffolk County has said it is not going to prosecute that case. The mother's case is being prosecuted in Nassau County because the mother's torso was found in the late 90s in Hempstead Lake State Park, and then her extremities were found by Jones Beach during the Gilgo investigation about 14 years later.
So a different jurisdiction.
Yes, yes.
And so what are we expecting from that case? Where does that land?
Well, there's been an indictment. Andrew Dykes was brought up from the South a couple of months ago, and he was accused of killing Tanya Jackson, who we met in the U.S. Army. She was living in Brooklyn, when I see some other people coming on. Tatiana Dykes was living with her mother in Brooklyn when she disappeared in the late 90s. And her torso was found, but then nothing else was found until about 14 years later. And so, that case regarding Peaches is pending with an indictment in Nassau County. This sergeant that was accused, he had knowledge of physiology. He used to teach that course in the U.S. Army, and he also was an Army medic who used to work in operating rooms, so he would have been familiar with the human anatomy.
And Ace, were you outside at the podium when Asa spoke along with her attorney?
Yes, and she only spoke very briefly. I could only hear her saying something like she felt for the victims and their families. And then one of the reporters tried to ask her, how could you not know? Or did you have any indication that your husband was doing this? And then she kind of abruptly left the podium with her attorney, Bob Macedonia.
Mary, we actually have that sound. I want to play that sound, and then I'm going to ask you to give me your reaction to what her demeanor was like, because oftentimes that can give us a little bit more insight and richness to all of it. We're going to go ahead and play the sound now from Asa Ellerup, who is the ex-wife of Rex Heuermann.
Thank you, everybody. It's been an extremely emotional day for all involved, and I know everybody's been here since early in the morning. I would just like to read a statement on behalf of the family, then I'll take a few questions, and then when I'm through, Asa will read a statement on behalf of herself and her family. Today is an extremely difficult day for everyone involved. I'd like to commend Ray Tierney and the task force for the amazing job they did in solving these crimes. It's been traumatizing Long Island for well over 3 decades. First and foremost, our hearts are with the victims and their families. They have suffered unimaginable loss, and nothing said here today can lessen that pain. Let me be absolutely clear. We just heard in the courtroom, Rex Heuermann and Rex Heuermann alone is responsible for these horrific crimes. Any suggestion that Asa Ellerup or Victoria Heuermann were involved is irresponsible. They have no knowledge, no involvement, or any connection to these heinous acts. The evidence that's been put out in the courtroom simply does not support any other fact pattern. Mrs. Ellerup and Victoria accept today's outcome without question. she and her family have cooperated fully since day one with law enforcement and will continue to respect this legal process as it comes to a conclusion. This situation is deeply personal and profoundly painful for Ms. Ellerup and her family. She never wanted to believe the man she was married to for 27 years, the father of Victoria, would be capable of committing such heinous acts. Like so many others, she is still trying to process what was just revealed inside that courtroom, and she has to remain strong for her family. On behalf of her family, she's asking for privacy, compassion, and understanding as she now navigates these circumstances which nobody could have anticipated a little more than 3 years ago. Today is not about Asa. It's not about Victoria. It is about the victims and their families, but we just stated have suffered unimaginable losses. And this family will continue in cooperating with the District Attorney's Office and law enforcement in the pursuit of justice wherever it may take us. Any questions?
Can we hear from Asa?
Yeah, no, we shortly will hear from Asa, yes. Just want to know, she's not going to answer any questions. She's going to read a statement, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Okay. She's not going to answer questions. She's going to read a statement that she prepared last night. She's not going to ask any questions.
Can you come to the center back where you are?
Okay, right up, Asa, just step up. Slow. Okay.
No questions?
No
Okay.
questions.
My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. Their loss is immeasurable, and the focus should be on them at this time and moment. I ask that you give some privacy to my family as they navigate through this very difficult time.
How did you not see what he was? How did you not see what he had done? You were living with him.
Sir, the District Attorney's Office has thoroughly investigated these crimes, okay? It has been proven.
You were living in the same house with him.
She was away.
What were the
She was
signs?
away each and every occasion. We've answered this 1,000 times, okay? You guys have the bail applications. You have the investigation.
Believe that he was guilty.
Yeah, that's it. There's no questions, okay?
And that was Asa Ellerup, who is the ex-wife, the former wife of Rex Heuermann. Mary Murphy's still here, our longtime reporter here at PIX-11 News, who has come back so that she could be in the courtroom during this hearing today. We also have Dante Mills, criminal defense attorney, with us to help lend some insight into the proceedings today. Interestingly, Dante, you talked about the fact that there was a real pivotal moment in the state's case against Rex that really may have also pushed this towards the guilty pleas. And talk about that.
Yeah, so we heard Michael Brown talking. He talked about one of the moments that made a difference for them and their defense team is when they made a motion to sever these cases, to try them individually. Each murder would be tried individually.
And
that
why would
motion
an
was
attorney do
denied.
that?
He wanted to do that because when you think of these cases, and I talked a little bit earlier about proving something beyond a reasonable doubt and checking off all of the boxes that you need to, all of these cases individually, it's a little tough to do that because they happened so long ago. You don't have eyewitnesses and things like that yet.
Not for
in some
every,
cases,
not for
some that
every
saw a
single
car
one,
or some,
right.
you know, and there's pieces individually for each case that adds to the puzzle. But if you isolate those pieces, will it be enough? That was the concern for the prosecutors, and that was the theory, you know, and the reason why the defendants wanted to separate these cases. The judge said no. He doesn't think that they should be separated. They should be tried together. And when you tie all of these cases together and you're able to add a piece from here, a piece from here, now you have a complete picture. And I think it would have been more likely that a jury would have found him responsible for these killings because they had all of the information
All of the evidence
and was able
for
to
all of the cases
consider it together.
At one. We just saw his wife there, and Mary, your reaction to her statement. I mean, I saw it as something that was just the bare minimum that she could say.
Well, you have to remember that she's been participating in a documentary with the Peacock Network. Right. And so I think she's limited in what she can say publicly because she's under a contract with Peacock. So is her attorney. I will tell you that I met Victoria Heuermann, the daughter, in court a few months ago, shortly after the documentary came out. And I thought she presented very well in the documentary. I thought she was articulate. I felt for her. I felt empathy. And I think a lot of other people did too, based on what I read online. So I told her she did a good job in the documentary. And you should see the smile that lit up her face. I don't think that young woman has had much good news in the last 2.5 years since her father was arrested. She also lost her job because she used to work in his office in Midtown. So I feel for Victoria Heuermann. And, you know, she was dragged into this lawsuit that Johnny Ray just put out.
Right.
The biological son of Valerie Mack is suing the whole family for wrongful death. So that's just my impression.
Right. And as far as Asa, her demeanor, what you picked up from this?
I mean, she just seems fatigued. I really wouldn't know how to describe it. She seems really tired by the whole process. She said the focus, rightly so, should be on the victims and their families. She said something very brief, but I don't think she's allowed to talk that much because of her contract.
Right. More so that, because she is right now she's tied to the Peacock network, and they're compensating her reportedly, you know, for $1 million, her and Victoria, for their participation in all of that. Mary Murphy, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We look forward to reading more on your blog. And so tell people where they can read your reportage on this from the front row in the courtroom.
Oh, yeah, I have a blog, marymurphyofficial.com. And I also am on Twitter. A lot of the people that have followed this case have followed me on X. I call it Twitter still. But I'm not quite retired
Mary,
from journalism.
Most of us still call it Twitter.
No, so yeah, I retired from local TV news because the grind is really hard. And I did it for 40 years, 30 of those at PIX-11. And I feel like we had a great team there, and you are still doing great work at PIX-11. So I'm glad I could help out a little bit today.
We're part of this. We're so glad that you came out of retirement to be with us today on this most momentous day when Rex Heuermann has taken responsibility and pleaded guilty to 8 murders of women on Long Island. Thank you so much for your service. I want to bring in another attorney in addition to Dante Mills, who's with us here. We have Steve Silpe, who is a matrimonial attorney, and he is a matrimonial attorney to the rich and the famous. Most notably, or one of the more notable cases, he represented Harvey Weinstein in his divorce as he was facing down criminal allegations. And the reason why we want to bring Steve in with his perspective is we talk about how people go to lengths to try to protect the remaining family members from being sued and left destitute by victims in the wake of their crimes and their criminal actions. So, Steve, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being here today.
Hi, Kirsten. Good afternoon. How are you?
Great, thank you. It has been an incredible day for people who are finally getting closure after 30 years of the activity of this Long Island serial killer. And we wanted to talk to you. We've been talking with Dante Mills, who is an attorney as well, and he's been bringing in a lot of the perspective about how somebody brings a case against 2 ancillary family members who are not in any way accused of assisting in the murders, but wanting them to pay the price for their loved one being murdered. How do you separate out the assets in a divorce case? And interestingly, Asa Alarup filed for divorce within 1 hot week of her husband being arrested. Is that a pretty well thought out move in your eyes?
Sure. You want to run away from any exposure to Mr. Heuermann as fast as you can. That fact that she did not linger may be a critical piece of evidence and testimony in favor of not holding her liable. It's an attenuated line between what she has and her liability as opposed to Mr. Heuermann, and I assume the reason that they are pursuing Ms. Ellerup is because Mr. Heuermann has few, if any, assets.
And
but
we don't know what their divorce yielded because those records are not public. So we don't know, what he agreed. It did take 1.5 years for the divorce to go through, which can be considered somewhat speedy in New York State. I think your cases can go. They can be both ends of the spectrum. They can be very long and drawn out if people really want to fight for a long time and have a lot of money to put at it, or they can be a little bit more expedited if the goal is something a little bit different.
Right. Well, there are two classes of assets here that Ms. Ellerup has that might be in a really optimistic scenario from the victim's point of view in the pot. The first would be whatever she received in the divorce. She's got an absolute entitlement to equitable distribution in her divorce, whether or not she received more than she was entitled to as a way of defrauding creditors or keeping assets that would otherwise have gone to Mr. Heuermann and then been exposed to the creditors. We don't know. But
and by creditors, you mean victims' family members who are going.
Correct.
We've got one family member, the son Benjamin Torres, who is the son of Valerie Mack. His attorney has filed a lawsuit on his behalf, but we have 7 other victims. And of course, I'm sure there are many families that are looking at this and saying, well, if he can get compensated for this, we should too.
Yeah, and there are going to be many, many obstacles. I didn't hear the earlier piece, but I'm sure that if it hasn't been discussed, it will be discussed in terms of issues about the statute of limitations.
Right, because that's currently at 2 years, but Benjamin Torres was a minor child. He was a very young boy when his mom was murdered.
Right. From what I read in the news, he was about 6 years old when his mom was murdered. So the statute of limitations for him would have expired in or about 2014 or 2015. All of these things.
But then his attorney is also saying, there are extenuating circumstances because she was dismembered and she wasn't identified. And so, you can't proceed at that point. And then, the suspect hasn't been identified and you can't proceed, you can't proceed until you have somebody that you can go for.
There may be issues on both ends. That is, at the beginning of the case, you've got to at least start by overcoming the statute of limitations problem. On the back end, it would seem like the only real pot of money that people are talking about is the money that Ms. Ellerup received for the NBC Peacock documentary. And
would a homeowner's insurance policy or an umbrella policy potentially come into play?
I'm not an insurance expert, but vast majority of homeowners insurance policies accept intentional acts from liability. So you can't go and beat up your neighbor and then have your insurance company pick up the damages under your homeowner's insurance policy in most cases.
So what I'm hearing here from you, Steve Silpy, from you, Dante Mills, is there are so many question marks around this action.
There's questions, but this isn't. Listen, serial killer and catching a serial killer, it's a rare thing. But when you break it down, murders happen often, unfortunately, and lawsuits follow them often. So this isn't new territory in regards to bringing a wrongful death action against someone who murdered one of your family members. So a lot of this has been kind of worked out in previous cases. And I can tell you that most homeowners policies, they will cover those intentional acts. When we have people that are shot, stabbed, or get into a fight at a bar or a nightclub or something like that, and we're going after the perpetrator, the homeowner's policy is one of those purses that are generally available. It's business policies, business insurance policies, where you have to have that additional intentional act inclusion. But homeowners policies covers that. Most people don't know that. But if you own your home, you have a policy, and you get into a fight and somebody sues you because you injure them, your homeowner's policy will cover it.
And I was
that's
going to
really,
say,
it's
you know,
pretty standard.
There's inside the home and outside the home. And in this case, he murdered these women inside his home.
But even outside of the home, even if you're outside the home, that your homeowner's policy generally gives you that umbrella protection if you are sued for an intentional act.
And you also brought up an interesting point with a business policy. He was also a business owner. He had his architecture firm in Manhattan as well. So there are several ways potentially, and Johnny Ray, the attorney for this, is seeing these opportunities and these ways
Absolutely.
to get compensation
and a lot
for
of
his
times,
client.
If you, for example, if I'm bringing this civil lawsuit, will I add his business? Maybe, because even if there's not that linchpin where you can tie them in, the business may say, we don't want to be attached to this, so we're going to just pay to get away from it. Right. And that may be a way to open up an additional purse. When you talk about a business, I represent a lot of high-profile people as their personal attorneys.
Right.
Most times when they're sued, it's not because of something they did. It's because of something somebody they know did or something like that. But if you can make a connection to somebody with money, like a business, you're going to make that connection with the expectation that they're not going to want to sit through a civil trial, his business, the engineering firm that he was working with, the architectural firm. So they'll pay to get out of it. And that's a way to get money, even to fund the case, the main case that you're going to try against the family members.
You know, and I want to bring Steve Silpe back into the conversation because something so interesting here that I find parallels with Harvey Weinstein, and I don't know how much you can share with that since you were his attorney as well, but you were helped to get his divorce through when he had impending criminal actions coming his way, and you want to be able to shift those assets over to protect the soon-to-be ex-wife and the children, and that was the case with Heuermann too, that he had a stepson and a daughter with Asa Ellerup. Is this a move that sticks, or can the court reverse that and say, not so fast, you all knew what you were doing, and she was living with him at the time of the commission of these crimes, and that money is fair game, the property, the assets, any bank accounts. Will a court do that?
It's very unlikely. She had an absolute right to equitable distribution of these assets. That claim came into being as soon as they got married. What a court may look at would be to what extent she received a disproportionate amount of the assets. One would assume right off the bat she would get at least 50%, and maybe more, either because of a claim of wasteful dissipation of assets by virtue of him not having being able to continue working. They might have agreed to roll into the asset distribution support because they recognized that he was not going to be able to earn a living. There'd be a lot of different ways that she could get a disproportionately large distribution of assets and not have it be deemed fraud. And that's what the court would be looking at, would be, was this a conscious effort by the two of them to engage in a fraud against the creditors? The fact that it's already been now blessed by the court in terms of a judgment of divorce really means that in order to open that up, they would have to show, or the creditors would have to show actual fraud. And that would be hard to do. Now, if it turns out that she got 100% of everything, you know, that's certainly a starting point. My perception from what I've read is there are not significant assets out of in their personal holdings.
I mean, at one point in time, they owed $450,000 in back taxes.
Right.
So it seems, you know, when you look at something like that, unless somebody is just, you know, willfully not paying, that there may have been money troubles. And certainly the home is modest by standards
Right.
of its neighboring homes.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be a source of recompense, which is why they're looking at the NBC Peacock money.
Sure.
But there are going to be a lot of hurdles to get that money, unless they can prove some direct connection between Asa Ellerup and these crimes.
Right.
Even a cover-up of these crimes.
Right. And that is something that her attorney has very strongly denied, as you would imagine.
Right.
Steve Silpe, matrimonial attorney with Gar Silpe here in Manhattan. We thank you so much for your time and lending us your expertise. We appreciate you this morning. Or
Thank
this
you so
afternoon
much,
now,
Kirsten.
as this has
Right.
continued to roll on. Thank you, Steve. I have
Thank
Dante Mills still here. Thank you so much. And we want to bring back James Ford, who has been, no, actually James Ford is pulled away on other matters out of the courthouse. But we're going to wrap up with Dante Mills as we talk about very stunning move. Rex Heuermann pleading guilty to 8 murders, 7 of those he had been charged with. An 8th victim he has now admitted to killing her, although he's not been charged with the crime in all of this, receiving life sentences, consecutive life sentences for these, and agreeing to work with the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit,
Kirsten,
which
that's a
is
great point.
wow.
And if we just run through the benefits of today, right? You have closure for the families of these victims.
Right.
You have a serial killer behind bars for the rest of his life, and you have the opportunity to learn why he did it, how he did it in this FBI behavioral study. I think it's important because serial killers are psychopaths, right? There's something going on that normal people can't understand.
No.
And in order to find them, we hear, have these shows and stuff on Netflix of finding a killer.
Right. All these true crime
But in order to know
podcasts and
how
shows,
they
yeah.
operate so that you can prevent them or someone else from doing the same thing, you have to have some kind of an understanding. And I think that's an additional benefit that we didn't expect to come out of this.
Yeah.
And I think we both looked at each other
I know,
and
we
kinda
were both
smiled
like,
when that
wow,
popped
that's
up. Like,
incredible.
that is incredible
I mean,
because they'll have the opportunity to learn.
It's like a community service mitzvah at the end of all of this, which is just incredible. I want to bring back James Ford, who's been at the courthouse all morning long, who has been there through all of these press conferences as the attorneys and different players have come out. James, thanks for being here still.
Sure. But of course, look, I think the thing I'd like to focus on first is what Heuermann's own attorney was saying, Michael Brown. What I asked him was, when did Heuermann change his approach and why? The why we got some insight on, the when, not a lot. And here's the thing. What Brown said was this: Heuermann has been in contact with his wife and daughter. They have been in communication. That might have played a role in him deciding to change from insisting that he was innocent to deciding to come forward and just plead guilty to everything.
And
that might have been a really big factor.
Them the details. He was also, very interestingly, exchanged correspondence with the happy-faced serial killer. And this was brought out through Laura Engel, our partner at News Nation reporter. And she had spoken with a happy-faced killer about this, and he encouraged Rex to do this, to plead, because then he could control the narrative and would control what was not released.
Sure. And you'll note, too, that part of this agreement is he does have to cooperate with the FBI going forward. And they truly have experts on serial killers. So he's still, they're going to ask him all kinds of questions for a very long time, but he still controls that narrative as well. He gets to control what gets said, and there aren't surprises that come out in court. Also, it's worth pointing out, he pled guilty to each of these charges, but from what I am told, he was very matter-of-fact about it. It was just, did you kill victim number one, victim number two, victim number three. Was it and his answer, very cut and dry.
Yeah,
yes.
Not a jot of emotion.
No, and then asked how it was done, and he would give one-word answers, just strangulation,
right?
Strangulation. To your point, Kirsten, yeah, that's no detail, and that's something we're not going to know for quite some time, if ever, what those details are. And I am sure there are many, many details to be had. One other thing, excuse me, John Ray, whom we've been talking about a lot throughout this streaming newscast, did also point out that those kinds of details are what the families want to know. As grisly as they may be, it still provides further closure for some of the families, his client in particular.
Those kinds of details are just, they're heartbreaking, they're gut-wrenching. It's just something that you don't want to hear, but yet some actually do want to know what happened to their loved one in her final moments.
Or at least why, right? A lot of people want to know just why. Why her? Why did you pick my daughter, my niece, my mom? You know,
and and we have just a couple minutes left before we wrap this broadcast up. But when police were finally actively investigating this, when Rodney Harrison finally came on the scene, they still found him calling and making all kinds of calls to these escort services. But he was not, to their knowledge, committing murders.
To their knowledge.
To their knowledge.
Now we can rest assured knowing he will not
but he was still
on the street
very
again,
actively making those calls.
Yeah.
Right.
That was something that worried them, and that's what, they eventually closed in on him.
Sure, and that brings up one other thing that's related to the terms of this agreement. He doesn't have to, he will not be charged with any other crime. So let's just say new information comes up that might connect him to some other crime. He's immune from that according to this agreement. And certainly his own legal team is saying, well, that makes sense. That they're saying they are advocating as strongly as they can for him. And even if there were to be additional charges, in a way, they're arguing it wouldn't matter because he's made these guilty pleas that keep him behind bars for the rest of his life and beyond. I mean, these are consecutive.
Right. There's absolutely
these are
no
consecutive
chance
sentences. So
ever coming out, and that of course is some small cold comfort, as we would say.
I mean, the one downside to that, though, just to mention, if it does come out that he committed additional murders, even if he confesses to them, those families won't get the satisfaction of knowing that he was found guilty or sentenced or charged, for their loved one. So that is the one downside to that kind of an agreement, but I understand the nature of it.
Right. Well, this has just been, it's been a fascinating and a momentous day. I thank you both for being here. James Ford, you've been a reporter on this case for decades. I have been following it as well for decades. You and I both have 30 years plus under our belts, so that's how long that this has been going on. Dante Mills, thank you so much for being with us. We have more to come. The district attorney is going to be speaking. We're expecting that at 2 o'clock today. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, along with, we were told, victims' family members will be coming to the microphone. So we're going to stream that right here. That's expected at 2 o'clock. Of course, we're going to have coverage over the air on our regularly scheduled broadcasts at 4, 5, 6, and 10, and on the PIX-11 morning news tomorrow morning. That's where I live. And we greatly appreciate you joining us today. I'm Kirsten Cole. Thank you for your time. I hope that you have enjoyed this broadcast.